Anna Kujawa, reading A Course in Miracles, the complete and annotated edition, Chapter 14, Section 12, The Test of Perfect Peace. But the essential thing is learning that you do not know. Knowledge is power, and all knowledge is of God. Now you who have tried to keep power for yourself have lost power. You still have the power, but you have interposed so much between you and the power. In your awareness of the power, you have interposed so much between your power and your awareness of your power that you cannot use your power. Everything you have taught yourself has made your power more and more obscure to you. You know not what your power is, and you know not where your true power is. What you have made is a semblance of power and a show of strength, a semblance of power and a show of strength that is so pitiful that it must fail you. Because power is not seeming strength, and that means that truth is beyond semblance of any kind. Yet all that stands between you and the power of God in you is just your learning of the false and your attempts to undo the true. Everything that you have learned is false. Be willing, then, for all the false that you have learned to be undone, and be glad that you're not bound by that false learning forever. You're not bound to it forever. Be glad. Because you have taught yourself how to imprison a child of God, the souls of God. A lesson so unthinkable that only the insane in deepest sleep could even dream of that. Can God learn how not to be God? And can you, given all power by God, learn to be powerless? What have you taught yourself that you can possibly prefer to keep in place of what you have and in place of what you are? The Course in Miracles teaches you how to escape forever from everything that you have taught yourself in the past. And the way that it does that is it shows you only what you are now. Learning has been accomplished before learning's effects are manifest. Learning is therefore in the past, but learning's influence determines the present by giving the present whatever meaning it holds for you. Your learning gives the present no meaning at all. Nothing you have ever learned can help you understand the present or teach you how to undo the past. Your past is what you have taught yourself. Let it all go. Let it all go. That means do not attempt to understand any event or anything or anyone in the past's light, because the light of darkness by which you try to see can only obscure. In other words, put no confidence in the past, which is the darkness, to illuminate your understanding. Because if you put your confidence in the past to illuminate your understanding, you will contradict the light, and you will thereby think that you see the darkness. You will think you see the past. Yet the darkness, the past, cannot be seen, because the past, the darkness, is nothing more than a condition in which seeing becomes impossible. You who have not yet brought all of the darkness that you have taught yourself unto the light in you, you can hardly judge the truth and the value of this course. Yet God did not abandon you. And so, because God did not abandon you, you have another lesson sent from God, already learned for every child of light by the Spirit to whom God gave that plan. That lesson. And this lesson that God gave to the Spirit in you, this lesson already learned for every child of light. This lesson shines with God's glory, because in this lesson lies God's power, which God shares so gladly with you. Learn of God's happiness, which is your happiness. But to accomplish this, all your dark lessons must be brought willingly to truth and joyously laid down by hands open to receive and not closed to take. To accomplish learning of God's happy lessons, all your past lessons must be brought willingly to truth and joyously laid down by hands open to receive, not closed to take. Every dark lesson that you bring to your higher mind, to the truth, who teaches light, the light will accept from you because you don't want it. And then your higher mind will gladly exchange each lesson from the past, each dark lesson from the past, for the bright lesson that your higher mind has learned for you. Never believe that any lesson that you have learned apart from the light, apart from Spirit, means anything. You have one test, a test that is as sure as God, by which to recognize if what you learned is true. What is that one test? A test that's sure as God, by which to recognize if what you've learned is true. Here's the test. If you are wholly free of fear of any kind, and if all those who meet or even think of you share in your perfect peace, then you can be sure that you have learned love's truth's lesson and not yours. Unless all this is true, then there are dark past lessons in your mind which hurt and hinder you and everyone around you. The absence of perfect peace, in other words, means only one thing. The absence of perfect peace means you think you don't want for you what your Creator wants for you. Every dark past lesson teaches this in one form or another, and each bright lesson with which the higher mind will replace the dark lessons that you don't accept. Each bright lesson with which your higher mind will replace the dark lessons that you don't accept and hide teaches that you want what your Creator wants for you, that you do want the love and the joy and the happiness that your Creator wants for you. Don't be concerned that you can't learn a lesson so completely different from everything you have taught yourself. Do not be concerned how you can learn a lesson so completely different from everything you have taught yourself. How would you know? Your part is very simple. You need but recognize that everything that you learned in the past, you do not want. Ask to be taught. And don't use your past experiences to confirm what you have learned. When your peace is threatened or disturbed in any way, say to yourself, I don't know what anything, including this, means, and so I do not know how to respond to it. And I will not use my own past learning as the light to guide me now. What are you supposed to say? When your peace is threatened or disturbed in any way, say to yourself, I do not know what anything, including this, means, and so I do not know how to respond to this. And I will not use my own past learning as the light to guide me now. And by this refusal to attempt to teach yourself what you don't know, then the guide whom God has given you will speak to you. And the guide that God has given you will take its rightful place in your awareness the instant you abandon love's rightful place and offer your awareness to love. You cannot be your own guide to miracles, because it is you who made miracles necessary. And because you made miracles necessary, well, they have been provided for you. You can make no needs that your Creator will not meet if you but turn to your Creator ever so little. And you need turn to your Creator ever so little because your Creator cannot compel you to turn to your Creator and still remain itself. It's impossible that God lose His identity, because if God lost His identity, well, then you would lose your identity, because God's identity is your identity, and being your identity, God cannot change Himself, for your identity is changeless. The miracle, the correct perception, acknowledges God's changelessness by seeing you as you always were and not as you would make yourself. The right thoughts Right thoughts, miracles, bring the effect which only guiltlessness can bring, and thus miracles and right thoughts establish the fact that guiltlessness must be. How can you, so firmly bound to guilt and committed to remain so firmly bound to guilt, establish for yourself your guiltlessness? It's impossible for you to establish your guiltlessness for yourself. You who are so firmly bound to guilt and committed so to remain so bound to guilt. You can't establish your guiltlessness for yourself. That's impossible, but be sure that you are willing to acknowledge that it is impossible for you to establish your guiltlessness yourself. It is only your thought that you can run some little part or deal with some certain aspects of your life alone that limits your higher mind's guidance. It's only your thought that you can run some little part or deal with certain aspects of your life alone that limit your higher mind's guidance. That's how you make your higher mind undependable. And then you use this fancied undependability as an excuse for keeping certain dark lessons from your past, from your higher mind. And by so limiting the guidance of your higher mind, by so limiting the guidance that you would accept, you are unable to depend on miracles to answer all problems for you. All problems for you. Do you think that what your higher mind would have you give, your higher mind would withhold from you? You have no problems which your higher mind cannot solve by offering you a miracle, a right thought. Miracles are for you, and every fear, every pain, and every trial that you have has been undone. Your higher mind has brought all your fears and pains and trials to the light and accepted the light instead. Your higher mind has brought all of your fear and your pain and your trial to the light, having accepted them instead of you and recognizing that your fear, your pain, and every trial never were. Your higher mind has brought every fear and pain and trial to the light and recognized that they never were. There are no dark lessons from the past that your higher mind has not already lightened for you. In other words, the lessons you would teach yourself, your higher mind has corrected already. Your fear, your pains, your trials, they don't exist in your higher mind's mind at all, because the past doesn't bind your loving right mind, your higher mind, and therefore your past doesn't bind you. Your divine indweller, your higher mind, does not see time as you do. And each miracle that your higher mind offers you corrects your use of time and makes time loves. Your higher mind, who has freed you from the past, wants to teach you that you are free from the past. Your higher mind only wants you to accept its accomplishments as yours, because your higher mind did them for you. And because your higher mind did them for you, these accomplishments are yours. Your higher mind has made you free of what you made. Your loving right mind, your divine indweller, the spark of the divine within your mind, has made you free of what you made. You can deny your divine indweller, but you cannot call upon your loving right mind in vain. Your loving right mind always gives what it has made in place of you. Your loving right mind would establish its bright teaching so firmly in your mind that no dark lesson of guilt from the past can even live in what love has established as holy in you by its presence. Thank God that your divine indweller is there within you and that it works through you. Thank God. And if you will thank God that Holy Spirit is in your mind and works through you, then all of God's works are yours. Your divine indweller offers you a miracle with every miracle you let it do through you. God's souls will always be indivisible. And as we are held as one in God, so do we learn as one in God. Love's teacher is as like to love's creator as is love's creations. And through love's teacher does love proclaim its oneness and ours. So listen. Listen in silence. And that means don't raise your voice against love, because love teaches the miracle of oneness. And before love's lesson, division disappears. If you will teach like love and teach like God here, then you will remember that you have always created like your Creator. If you will teach like God here, then you'll remember that you've always created like your Creator. That's because the miracle of creation has never ceased. And that's because creation has the holy stamp of immortality upon it. This is the will of God for all creation. And all creation joins in willing this. Those who remember always that they know nothing, but who have become willing to learn everything, well, they will learn it. But whenever you trust yourself, you won't learn. And because whenever you're trusting in yourselves, well, you've destroyed your motivation for learning by thinking that you already know. I have destroyed my motivation for learning by thinking that I already know. So don't think you understand anything until you pass the test of perfect peace. Because peace and understanding go together. And that means that peace and understanding can never be found alone or apart. Each peace and understanding brings the other with it. For it is the law of God that peace and understanding be not separate. Peace and understanding are cause and effect, each to the other, so where one is absent, the other cannot be. Only those who see that they cannot know or understand unless the effects of understanding are with them, only those can really learn it all. And for this, it must be peace that you want, and nothing else. Only those who see, which means understand, that they cannot know unless the effects of understanding are with them, only they can really learn it all. And for this type of learning, realizing that unless I have the effects of understanding, well, I don't know. I cannot know unless I've got the effects of understanding there. I must not know unless the effects of understanding are there, called peace. Well, for this understanding, it must be peace that you want, and nothing else. Now, whenever you think you know, peace will depart from you. Why? Because whenever you think you know, you have abandoned the teacher of knowledge and the teacher of peace. And so whenever you fully realize that you know not, well, then peace will return, and so will the teacher of peace. For you will have invited the teacher of peace to return by abandoning your own ego on behalf of the teacher of peace. Call not upon the ego for anything. Don't call upon your ego for anything. That is the only thing you need do. Don't call upon your ego for anything. And if you will not call upon your ego for anything, then your higher mind will of itself fill your mind that so makes room for it. In other words, if you want peace, you must abandon the teacher of attack. If you want peace, you must abandon the teacher of attack. Now, the teacher of peace can never abandon you. You can desert the teacher of peace. You can desert the teacher of peace, but the teacher of peace will never reciprocate, because the faith of the teacher of peace in you is the understanding of the teacher of peace. The understanding of the teacher of peace, it is as firm as is its faith in the Creator, and it knows, the teacher of peace knows that faith in the Creator must encompass faith in the creation. In this consistency, lies the holiness of the teacher of peace. Which the teacher of peace cannot abandon, because it's not the will of the teacher of peace to abandon faith in the Creator and the creation. With your perfection ever in its sight, the teacher of peace gives the gift of peace to everyone who perceives the need for peace and who would have peace. So make way for peace, and peace will come, because understanding is in you. And from the understanding that is in you, peace must come. The power of God, from which they both arise, is yours as surely as it is God's. You think you don't know God, only because alone it is impossible to know God. But see the mighty works that infinite intelligence will do through you, and you must be convinced that you did those works through love, through God. It is impossible to deny the source of effects that are so powerful that they could not be of you. It's impossible to deny the source of effects that are so powerful they definitely could not be of you. So, if you will leave room for love, if you will leave room for infinite intelligence, then you will find yourself so filled with power that nothing will prevail against your peace. And then this will be the test by which you recognize that you have understood. Chapter 15, the holy relationships, the holy instant and special relationships. Section 1, the two uses of time. Can you imagine what it means to have no cares, no worries, no anxieties, but merely to be perfectly calm and quiet all the time? Well, that is what time is for. To learn just that and nothing more. The teacher of peace cannot be satisfied with its teaching until its teaching constitutes all of your learning. The teacher of peace has not fulfilled its teaching function until you have become such a consistent learner that you learn only of the teacher of peace in your mind. And when you learn only of the teacher of peace in your mind, you will no longer need a teacher or time in which to learn. One of the sources of perceived discouragement from which you suffer is your belief that this takes time, which means that the results of the teacher of peace's teaching are far in the future. This is going to take a long time, and the effects of this teaching are going to be far in the future. And now I am discouraged, and I am suffering from discouragement. Well, it's not so that this takes time and the effects of this teaching are far in the future. It's not so, because your higher mind uses time in its own way, which means your higher mind is not bound to time. Time is the friend of your higher mind. And time doesn't waste your higher mind like time wastes you. But all the waste that time seems to bring with it is due only to your identification with the ego, which uses time to support its belief in destruction. All the waste that time seems to bring, is just due to your identification with the ego, because the ego uses time to support its belief in destruction. The ego uses time to support its belief in destruction. And so all the waste that time seems to bring comes only from your identification with the ego, which wants to use time for destruction. The ego, just like your higher mind, uses time to convince you of the inevitability of the goal and the end of learning. To the ego, the goal is death, which is the ego's end. But to your higher mind, the goal is life, which has no end. The ego is an ally of time, but not a friend, because the ego is as mistrustful of death as the ego is mistrustful of life. And what the ego wants for you, it can't tolerate. For instance, the ego wants you dead, but not itself. And the outcome of the ego's strange religion, wanting you dead but not itself, therefore must be the conviction that the ego can pursue you beyond the grave. And out of your ego's unwillingness for you to find peace even in death, the death the ego wants for you, the ego offers you immortality in hell. And the ego speaks to you of heaven, but assures you that heaven's not for you. Because how can the guilty hope for heaven, says the ego to you. The belief in hell is inescapable to those who have identified with the ego, because that's all the ego wants for you. And so if you identify with the ego, then you are going to believe that hell is inescapable. And those who have identified with their ego, the ego, their nightmares and their fears are all associated with hell. And that's because the ego teaches that hell is in the future. Because teaching that hell is in the future is what all of the ego's teaching is directed to. Hell is in your future, is all that the ego, it's what all of the ego's teaching is directed to, teaching you that hell is waiting for you. Hell is in your future because that's all you deserve. And it's inescapable. And that's because hell is the ego's goal. Because although the ego aims at death and dissolution as an end, even the ego doesn't believe that. Even though the ego aims at death and dissolution as an end, even the ego doesn't believe in death and dissolution as an end. And that's why the goal of death, which your ego craves for you, leaves even the ego unsatisfied. No one who follows the ego's teaching is without the fear of death. Yet if death were thought of merely as an end to pain, then would it be feared? So why is it that we who follow the ego's teaching are afraid of death when supposedly death is an end of pain? Well, we have seen this strange paradox in the ego's thought system before, but never so clearly as here. Why? Because the ego must seem to keep fear from you, to keep your allegiance. Your ego must seem to keep fear from you. Your ego must seem to keep fear from you, to keep your allegiance. But the ego's got to engender fear in order to maintain itself. It's got to seem to keep fear from you in order to maintain your allegiance to it. But the ego's got to engender fear in order to maintain itself. And here again the ego tries and all too frequently succeeds in doing both. How? By using dissociation, by holding its contradictory aims together so that its contradictory aims seem to be reconciled. That's how it does it. It uses dissociation so that you don't see that the ego has irreconcilable contradictory aims. One is to appear to keep fear from you, while on the other hand engendering fear in order to exist. And so that you don't see that that doesn't make any sense and that's a total contradiction, it uses dissociation and denial. The ego teaches thus: death is the end as far as hope of heaven goes for you. But because you and the ego itself cannot be separated, and because the ego cannot conceive of its own death, your ego will pursue you still. Because, as the ego teaches, your guilt is eternal. So, death is the end as far as you are concerned, but your guilt is eternal. Now that is the ego's own version of immortality. The ego's version of immortality is that your guilt is eternal. And it is this that the ego's version of time supports. Also, the ego teaches that heaven is here and now, because the future is hell. And even when the ego attacks so savagely that the ego tries to take the life of someone who hears it temporarily as the only voice, the ego speaks of hell even to that person. Even to the person who listens to the ego and worships it as the only voice. The ego speaks even of hell to that person. Even to that person who worships the ego and listens only to the ego. The ego speaks of hell to them. That's how the ego is. Because the ego tells you that hell is also here and bids you leap from hell here into oblivion. And the only time the ego allows you to look upon with some amount of equanimity is the past. But even then, the past's only virtue is that the past is no more. And even though the past is the only time the ego allows you to look upon with any equanimity as the past, even then, the past's only virtue is that it is no more. How bleak and despairing is the ego's use of time, and how terrifying, because underneath the ego's fanatical insistence that the past and the future be the same is hidden a far more insidious threat to peace. Now, the ego doesn't advertise its final threat. Why? Because the ego would have its worshippers still believe that it can offer them the escape from the ego. But the belief in guilt must lead to the belief in hell. The belief in guilt must lead to the belief in hell, and always does. And so the only way the ego allows the fear of hell to be experienced is to bring hell here, but always just as a foretaste of the future. Because no one who considers themselves as deserving hell can believe that punishment will end in peace. Now, the teacher of peace, your loving right mind, your higher mind, your divine indweller, teaches this. There is no hell. Hell is only what the ego has made of the present. And the belief in hell prevents you from understanding the present, because now you're afraid of the present. The belief in hell is what prevents you from understanding the present, because now you're afraid of the present. But your higher mind leads as steadily to heaven as your ego drives to hell. Because the divine indweller in your mind, who knows only the present, uses time to undo the fear by which your ego would make the present useless. The divine indweller in your mind uses the present to undo the fear by which the ego would make the present useless. There is no escape from fear in the ego's use of time, because time, according to the ego's teaching, is nothing but a teaching device for compounding guilt, until that guilt becomes all-encompassing and demands vengeance forever in the ego's use of time. Now, the divine indweller in your mind would undo all of that now. Fear is not of the present. Fear is only of the past and future, which does not exist. There is no fear in the present when each instant stands clear and separated from the past, without the past shadow reaching out into the future. There is no fear in the present when each instant stands clear and separated from the past, without the past shadow reaching out into the future. Each instant is a clean, untarnished birth in which you emerge from the past into the present. And the present extends forever. The present is so beautiful and so clean and so free of guilt that nothing but happiness is there in the present. No darkness is remembered, and your immortality and your joy are now. This lesson takes no time, for what is time without a past and future? It has taken time to misguide you so completely, but it takes no time at all to be what you are now. So, begin to practice your divine indweller's use of time as a teaching aid to happiness and peace. Begin to use the loving right mind's use of time. Begin to practice love's use of time as a teaching aid to happiness and peace. And how do you do this? You take this very instant now and you think of it as all there is of time. That's what you do. And that's how you do it. And then nothing can reach you here out of the past. And it is here in this instant now, where this is all there is of time, that you are completely absolved, completely free, and wholly without condemnation. From this holy instant, wherein holiness is born, then you will go forth in time without fear, which means no sense of change with time. From this holy instant, wherein your innocence was born, is born, you will go forth in time. From this holy instant, you will go forth in time without fear. And you will go forth from this holy instant now with no sense of change with time. From this holy instant now. Time is inconceivable without change. And your innocence does not change. Learn from this instant more than merely that hell does not exist. In this redeeming instant lies heaven, and heaven will not change, because the birth into the holy present is freedom from change. Change is an illusion. Change is an illusion taught by those who could not see themselves as guiltless. Change is an illusion taught by those who could not see themselves as guiltless. But there's no change in heaven, because there's no change in God. In this holy instant, in which you see yourself as bright with freedom, you will remember God. In this holy instant, in which you see yourself as bright with freedom, you will remember God. Because remembering God is to remember freedom. And so whenever you are tempted to be dispirited by the thought of how long it will take for you to change your mind so completely, I want you to ask yourself, how long is an instant? And could you not give so short of a time to the divine indweller in you for your freedom? Your divine indweller asks no more, because the higher mind in you has no need of more time than an instant. Could you not give so short a time for your complete freedom? Could you not give so short of time to the higher mind for your freedom? Your higher mind asks no more than an instant, because your higher mind has no need of more than an instant to free you from the past and the future. It takes far longer to teach you how to be willing to give your higher mind this instant than it takes for your higher mind to use this tiny instant to offer you the whole of heaven. In exchange for this single, precious, holy instant, your higher mind stands ready to give you the remembrance of eternity. Chapter 15, complete and annotated edition of A Course in Miracles. Chapter 15, Section 2, Giving the Instant of Release. Giving the Instant of Release. You will never give this holy instant to the higher mind on behalf of your release while you are unwilling to give this instant of release to your brothers and sisters on behalf of their release. You will never give this holy instant to higher mind on behalf of your release while you are unwilling to give it to others on behalf of their release. For the instant of innocence, the instant of release is shared, which means the instant of release cannot be yours alone. The instant of release cannot be yours alone. So remember then, when you are tempted to attack another, that their instant of release is your instant of release. Miracles are the instances of release that you offer and you will receive. Miracles, which are the instance of release that you are willing to give and receive, they attest to your willingness to be released and your willingness to offer time to the higher mind for higher mind's use of time. How long is an instant? Well, an instant is as short for others as for you. And so practice giving this blessed instant of freedom. Practice giving this blessed instant of freedom to all who are enslaved by time, and thus make time their friend for them. The higher mind gives their blessed instant to you through your giving it. In other words, as you give the blessed instant of release, the higher mind offers the blessed instant of release to you. So be not unwilling to give what you want to receive of the higher mind, because you join with the higher mind in giving the blessed instant of release. In the crystal cleanness of the instant of release you give is your instantaneous release, escape from guilt. In the crystal cleanness of the instant of release you give is your instantaneous escape from guilt. You must be holy if you offer holiness. How long is an instant? It's as long as it takes to reestablish perfect sanity, perfect peace, and perfect love for everyone, for God and for yourself. Everyone, God, and for yourself. That's how long an instant takes. How long is an instant? It is as long as it takes you to remember immortality and your immortal creations who share immortality with you. And how long is an instant? It is as long as it takes to exchange hell for heaven. And how long is an instant? It is long enough to transcend all of the ego's making and ascend unto your Creator. Time is your friend if you leave it to higher mind to use. Higher mind needs but very little time to restore love's whole power to you. The spirit who transcends time for you, the higher mind that transcends time for you, It understands what time is for. Now, holiness doesn't lie in time, but in eternity. Holiness is not in time, but in eternity. And there never was an instant that you, God's child, could lose your purity. Your changeless, pure state is beyond time, because your purity remains forever beyond attack, which means without variability. Time stands still in your purity and doesn't change. Time stands still in your purity, which means time doesn't change. And so it's no longer time at all, because caught in the single instant of the eternal purity of you, time is transformed into forever. Give the eternal instant so that eternity can be remembered for you in that shining instant of perfect release. Offer the miracle of the holy instant through the higher mind in you, and leave higher minds giving that holy instant to God. A Course in Miracles is in time. Correction and healing is in time. The healing plan of man is in time, but not for time. Being for you, it is for the eternal. What holds remembrance of God cannot be bound by time. No more are you bound by time. For unless God is bound by time, then you cannot be free. Then no more are you, for unless God is bound, you cannot be bound. And so, an instant offered to the higher mind is offered to God on your behalf, and in that instant, you will awaken gently in your higher mind. In the blessed instant, you're going to let go all of your past learning, and the higher mind will then offer you quickly the whole lesson of peace. Now, what can take time when all the obstacles to learning it have been removed? See, truth is so far beyond time that all of truth happens at once. For as truth was created one, so truth's oneness depends not on time at all. So don't be concerned with time, and don't fear the instant of innocence, which will remove all fear, because the instant of peace is eternal. And the reason that the instant of peace and the holy instant and the instant of release and peace and the instant of innocence, the reason it is eternal is because the instant of peace is completely without fear. The instant of peace, the holy instant, will come, being the lesson that love gives you through love's teacher, that love is appointed to translate time into eternity. That instant of release, the instant of peace, the instant of release will come. It will come because it's the lesson that God gives you through the teacher God has appointed to translate time into eternity for you. Blessed are God's teachers whose joy it is to teach God's innocent children their innocence. Blessed are God's teachers whose joy it is to teach God's children of their innocence. God's joy is not contained in time, and God's teaching is for you, because God's joy is yours. And so, through God and through God's teacher, you stand before God's altar. Through love's teacher, you stand before love's altar, where love gently translates hell into heaven. For it's only in heaven that God wants you to be. It's only heaven where God wants you to be, and how long could it take for you to be where God wants you to be forever? How long can it take to be where God wants you to be? For you are where you have forever been and will forever be, which is the peace that God wants you to be. All that you have forever. And so the blessed instant reaches out to encompass time. The blessed instant reaches out to encompass time as God extends Himself to encompass you. You who have spent days, hours, and even years enchaining your brothers to your ego in an attempt to support your ego and uphold your ego's weakness, you don't perceive the source of strength. You don't perceive the source of strength because you have spent days, hours, and even years enchaining your brothers to your ego in support of your ego and an attempt to uphold your ego's weakness, and that's why you don't perceive the source of real strength. But in the holy instant, you will unchain all of your brothers and sisters, which means you will refuse to support either their weakness or your own weakness. You don't realize how much you have misused your brothers and sisters by seeing them as sources of ego support, and as a result, your brothers and sisters witness to the ego in your perception, which means others seem to provide reasons for not letting your ego go. But your brothers and sisters, they are far stronger and much more compelling witnesses for the higher mind in you, and they support the strength of the higher mind in you, your loving right mind, your sane mind. They are far stronger and much more compelling witnesses for your higher mind, and they support the strength of your higher mind, your right mind. It is therefore your choice whether others support the ego or your higher mind in you, and you will know which you have chosen that they support by their reactions. And somebody who's been released through the higher loving mind in you is always recognized if the release is complete. Somebody who has been released through the higher mind in a brother is always recognized if the release is complete. The higher mind in you and them cannot be denied. Now, as long as you remain uncertain of whether the release has been complete, it can only be because you have not given complete release. And because of this, you have not yet given one single instant completely to the higher mind, the loving right mind. Because when you have, you will be sure that you have given an instant completely to the higher mind. You'll be sure, in other words, because the witness to the higher mind in you will speak so clearly of your own higher mind that you will hear and you will understand. You will doubt until you hear one witness whom you have completely released through the higher mind. And then you will doubt no more. The holy instant has not yet happened to you, but it will, and you will recognize it with perfect certainty. No gift of God is recognized in any other way but complete certainty. Now you can practice the mechanics of the holy instant, and you will learn much from practicing the mechanics of the holy instant. But the holy instant's shining and glittering brilliance will literally blind you to this world by its own vision, which you cannot supply. You don't understand the light by which you see, and yet here it is, all in this instant, complete, accomplished, and given wholly. So start now to practice your little part in separating out the holy instant. And you will receive very specific instructions as you go along. And to learn to separate out this single instant and begin to experience it as timeless is to begin to experience yourself as not separate. Don't be afraid that you will not be given help in this practice. Fear not that you won't be given help in this practice. Love's teacher and love's lesson will support your strength. It is only your weakness that will depart from you in this practice, because it is the practice of the power of God in you. Use this practice only for one instant. Use this practice for but one instant, and you will never deny it again. Who can deny the presence of what the universe bows to in appreciation and gladness? Before the recognition of the universe, which witnesses to it, your doubts must disappear. Littleness versus magnitude. Be not content with littleness, but be sure you understand what littleness is and why you could never be content with littleness. Littleness is the offering you gave yourself. You offered littleness in place of your magnitude, and you accepted it. Everything in this world is little, because this world is a world made out of littleness in the strange belief that littleness can content you. And when you strive for anything in the world, in the belief that anything in the world will bring you peace, you are belittling yourself, which means blinding yourself to glory. Littleness and glory are the choices open to your striving and your vigilance. You will always choose one at the expense of the other. But what you do not realize each time you choose is that your choice is your evaluation of yourself. What you do not realize each time you choose is that your choice is your evaluation of yourself. If you choose littleness, you will not have peace, for you will have judged yourself unworthy of peace. And whatever you offer as a substitute is much too poor a gift to satisfy you. And so, it is essential that you accept the fact, and do so gladly, that there is no form of littleness that can ever content you. Now you are free to try as many forms of littleness as you wish, but all you will be doing is to delay your homecoming, because you can be content only in magnitude, which is your home. There is a deep responsibility that you owe yourself, and a responsibility which you must learn to remember all the time. The lessons will seem hard at first, but you will learn to love these lessons when you realize that it is true and that it constitutes a tribute to your power. There is a deep responsibility you owe yourself, and a deep responsibility which you must learn to remember all the time. The lesson will seem hard at first, but you will learn to love that lesson when you learn that that lesson is true, and that lesson constitutes a tribute to your power. And the lesson is this: you who have sought and found littleness, remember this: every decision that you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value that you put upon yourself. I'll say it again. Every decision that you make stems from what you think you are. And every decision that you make represents the value that you put upon yourself. Every little thing you seek and think you want defines you as little to yourself. Believe the little can content you, and by limiting yourself, you will not be satisfied. Because your function isn't little, and it's only by finding your function and fulfilling it that you can escape from littleness. There is no doubt about what your function is, because your higher mind knows what your function is, and there can be no doubt about your function's magnitude, because your function reaches you through source from magnitude. You don't have to strive for your magnitude, because you have your magnitude. All your striving must be directed against littleness, because it does require vigilance to protect your magnitude in this world. And to hold your magnitude in your awareness, in perfect awareness, in a world of littleness, well, that's a task that the little cannot undertake. Yet it is asked of you, but in tribute to your magnitude and not to your littleness. And nor is this asked of you alone. It's not asked of you alone, because the power of God Himself will support every effort you make on behalf of the magnitude of God's dear children, God's dear souls. Holding your magnitude in perfect awareness in a world of littleness, that's a task the little cannot undertake, but it is asked of you in tribute to your magnitude and not your littleness. But nor is it asked of you alone. And that's because the power of God will support every effort you make on behalf of the magnitude of God's dear souls. Now, if you search for the little, then you're going to deny yourself source power. And source is not willing that you be content with less than everything. Because source, your source, is not content without you. And you cannot be content with less than your source has given you. We asked you once before, would you be hostage to the ego or host to God? Let this question be asked of you by your loving right mind every time you make a decision. Let this question be asked of you every time you make a decision. Let this question be asked of you by your higher mind every time you make a decision. Would I be hostage to the ego or host to God? Hostage to the ego or host to truth? Let this question be asked of you every time you make a decision, because every decision you make does answer this, which means invite sorrow or joy accordingly. Now, when God gave Himself to you in your creation, God established you as host to Him forever. That means God has not left you, and you haven't left God. And all your attempts to deny God's magnitude and make yourself hostage to the ego guilt, that can't make little whom God has joined with Him. Every decision you make is made for heaven or for hell, and will bring you awareness of what you decided for. Now, your higher mind, the divine indweller in you, can hold your magnitude clean of all littleness, clearly and in perfect safety in your mind, untouched by every little gift the world of littleness would offer you. But for this, you cannot side against God in what God wills and wants for you. Your higher mind can hold your magnitude untouched, clearly and in perfect safety in your mind, untouched by every little gift the world of littleness would offer you. But for this, you cannot side against God in what God wants for you, which is magnitude, true power. So, decide for God through your higher mind, because littleness and the belief that you can be content with littleness, they are just the decisions that you have made about yourself. The power and the glory that lie in you from your source are for everyone who, like you, perceive themselves as little and have deceived themselves into believing that littleness can be blown up by them into a sense of magnitude that can content them. Neither give littleness nor receive littleness. Neither give littleness nor accept littleness. That's because all honor is due the host of God. Your littleness deceives you, but your magnitude is of Source who dwells in you and in whom you dwell. Touch no one then with littleness in the name of your true self, eternal host unto your Creator. In this season, which celebrates the birth of holiness into this world, join with me who decided for innocence for you. It is our task together to restore the awareness of magnitude to the host whom love appointed for itself. You, me. It is beyond all your littleness to give the gift of God, yes, but it's not beyond you. Because God would give Himself through you. Love would give itself through you. Source wants to give itself through you. Source reaches from you to everyone and beyond everyone to all of love's creations, but without leaving you. Far beyond your little world, but still in you, Source extends forever. Yet Source brings all its extensions to you as host to it. Is it a sacrifice to leave littleness behind and wander not in vain? It's not sacrifice to wake to magnitude, but it is a sacrifice to accept anything less than magnitude. So learn that you must be worthy. You must be worthy of the Prince of Peace that was born in you in honor of the love whose host you are. You don't know what love means because you have sought to purchase love with little gifts, which means you have valued love too little to be able to understand love's magnitude. Love is not little, and love dwells in you because you are host to love. You are host to Source God. And before the greatness that lives in you, your poor appreciation of yourself, and all the little offerings you have given, they slip into nothingness. Holy child of God, when will you learn that only innocence and magnitude can content you and give you peace? Remember, you don't learn only for yourself alone, no more than I did. And it's because I learned for you that you can learn of me. I would but teach you what is yours, so that together we can replace the shabby littleness that binds you to guilt and weakness with the glad awareness of the magnitude that is in you. My birth in you is your awakening to grandeur. So welcome me not into a manger, but welcome me into the altar to innocence in you, where innocence and guiltlessness abide and live in you in perfect peace. My birth in you is your awakening to grandeur. So don't welcome me into a manger. welcome me into the altar to innocence itself. You. My kingdom is not of this world because my kingdom is in you, says love, and you are of your Creator. So let us join in honoring you. Let us join in honoring you, you who must remain forever beyond littleness. And that means decide with me, who have decided to abide with you, says love, says the teacher of peace within us. And the teacher of peace within us says, I will as my Creator wills, knowing my Creator's will is constant and at peace forever with itself. You, says our teacher of peace, will be content with nothing but God's will for you. You will be content with nothing but what God wants for you, which is peace and magnitude and power and love and freedom forever. You will be content with nothing but what your Creator wants for you. Accept no less, remembering that everything I learned is yours. What my Creator loves, I love as it does, and I can no more accept creation as what it is not than God can. And no more can you. When you have learned to accept what you are, you will make no gifts to offer to yourself. When you have learned to accept what you are, you'll make no little gifts to offer to yourself, for you will know you are complete, which means in need of nothing, which means unable to accept anything for yourself. But you will gladly give, having received. The host of God Himself doesn't need to seek to find anything. And so if you are wholly willing to leave the plan for healing to the plan of God, and if you are unwilling to attempt to grasp for peace yourself, then freedom and release and healing will be given you. You, the host of God, need not seek to find anything. And so if you are wholly willing to leave freedom and release and healing to the plan of God, which means if you are wholly willing, if you are unwilling to attempt to grasp for peace yourself, then release and healing will be given you. Just don't think that you can substitute your plan for God's plan for your happiness. Rather, join with me, says the teacher of peace in us, that we may release all those who would be bound, proclaiming together that the children of God, the souls of God, are host only to God. And if you'll do this, then we will let no one forget what you want to remember. And in this way will you remember it. Call forth in everyone only the remembrance of God and of the heaven that is in them. Call forth only the remembrance of God in everyone, which means call forth only the remembrance that heaven is in them. For where you would help your brother be, there will you think you are. Where you would help others be, there will you think you are. So don't hear their call for hell and littleness. only hear their call for heaven, which means greatness. And don't forget that their call is your call. And answer them with me. God's power is forever on the side of God's host, you. Because God's power protects only the peace in which God dwells in you. And therefore, God's power is with you. And God's power dwells in you. So don't lay littleness before God's innocent altar, which is God's creations. Don't lay littleness before God's innocent altar, which is God's souls. And God's innocent altar, which is in God's innocent children, that is an altar which rises above the stars and reaches even to heaven because of what is given that altar. God's souls are altars to God, and those altars rise above the stars and reach even to heaven because of what is given to those altars. So don't lay littleness before the altars. Don't lay littleness before the souls of God.